Okay, everybody. Once again, welcome to the seminar. I fortunately know everybody because we spent a few days down on the coast together. Some of the things I may say will be repetitious, but everything's important. Okay, if you're thinking of living in Costa Rica, moving here now, 6 months, a year, you may have to go back to the States and get some affairs settled, so it'll be a while. The important thing is that you learn at least a survival level of Spanish. What do I mean by survival level? You don't have to speak the language fluid. Enough to get a taxi cab, talk to somebody in a supermarket, to confront daily situations, okay? So I'm going to give you some tips, okay? Shortcuts, okay? Things to remember. Now, tomorrow, a gentleman is coming. He's going to show you how to form simple sentences in Spanish. But I will just talk about some tips and things that may help you learn the language, or survive a language, rather, more quickly. You can't assume that everybody speaks English here. The younger generation, the young people are watching videos, TV programs in English, on the internet, listening to things in English. So a lot of younger people speak English, and people who work in tourism, some professionals like lawyers speak English, but you can't assume everybody speaks English. So that means you have to have some knowledge of Spanish in order to get by here in certain instances, circumstances. So, up here behind me, I have some suggestions. Build your vocabulary. Try to learn a minimum of 5 words a day. If you're really ambitious, 10. Well, do the math. After a year or so, you've got a pretty good sized vocabulary. Don't worry about sentences, just build your vocabulary. Why? Language is communication, maybe by saying one word, somebody will understand you, you know. You're in the supermarket and you say huevos, eggs, they know you're looking for eggs. On the other hand, Spanish speakers are rattling off sentences at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If you can catch a word here and there, you can get the gist of it. So you want to build your vocabulary. One thing that's important that I want to mention in terms of vocabulary, Spanish, the 5 vowel sounds are a, e, o, u instead of a, e, I, o, u. Once you learn those 5 sounds, the consonants or other letters are just like English, the pronunciation. There's a couple exceptions, but not many. So practice your a, e, o, u, and that will help you pronounce and understand Spanish. Okay. Textbook Spanish is important, but you want to expose yourself to different types of Spanish. Once you learn how to spell Spanish, you can watch a TV program in Spanish, and you hear a word. It's pretty easy to spell in Spanish, so you can jot down the word, look it up later, and see what it means. And that's a way to build your vocabulary. If you're reading a newspaper or something, see a word, write it down. But you have to go over and review this vocabulary. But as I said, the more words, the better. Number 3. Number 3 isn't that important, but it's interesting in that Spanish people are like Italians. You ever see Italians at dinner? They're making noise and it looks like they're arguing. So Spanish people are boisterous too. Okay, so you don't have to act like that, but notice it by all means. Okay, music. In Spanish, there's every type of music from rap to opera and everything else in between. Some of the songs are really beautiful, a lot of romantic music. Maybe you can listen to the music and a catchy tune you like and pick up a few words there. Okay, it's another source of language. Okay, talk with as many different Spanish speakers as you can. You will learn something for everyone. Carry a small notebook, write things down. In Costa Rica, the majority of the people speak Spanish, but the majority of the people are not Costa Ricans. As I mentioned when we were touring on the bus, Costa Rica is sort of a melting pot. You all heard of the American dream, what's left of it. Well, there's a Costa Rican dream. A lot of people from different countries, Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America, are from places where there's political unrest or violence, okay? Not every country. And they're seeking to go to another country. Many of them can't fulfill the requirements to get a visa to go to the U.S., so they come to Costa Rica to search for a better life because of opportunities and the fact that we don't have a war or anything going on, like unrest. So you'll hear a lot of different dialects. Read aloud in Spanish. This is important. A lot of people, when they study silently, okay? Stick the book in their nose in their book, and they maybe they stick the book in their nose too. They put their book, their face in the book and kind of just study silently. You should practice, once you have those vowel sounds down, reading Spanish, okay? 5 minutes a day. It helps you get used to pronouncing words in Spanish, okay? It's like boot camp. You're practicing. Just 5 minutes a day. Try to imitate the native speakers. Put a little emotion into it. After a while, if you go to a party, a couple of drinks, and you'll be speaking everything besides Spanish and Spanish. But it's true. Most people, when they have a little liquor in them, I'm not advocating drinking to learn Spanish, their language skills improve, foreign language skills. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Like any other activity, there's a learning curve, and you've got to fail your way to success. People are going to know you're obviously not a native speaker and you're learning, so put your foot in your mouth, You're not getting a grade like in high school for your Spanish lessons. Your pronunciation doesn't have to be perfect. Take the plunge, make an effort. I remember regarding number 8, I had a neighbor who was from the States, and he came here and he retired. And he really made a big effort to learn the language. So one time he went into a restaurant, and one of the dishes they eat here, it's very popular, is rice and shrimp and rice, You might have seen it on the menus. And it's called arroz, rice, con camarones, okay? But he made a mistake. He said arroz con camiones, and camiones are trucks. So I told him those tires must have been pretty hard to chew. But he made an effort. So, at least he had the guts to try it. Okay, number 9, once you make a little progress in Spanish, maybe have some lessons, try using some of your vocabulary in simple sentences like, my name is John, I live in Costa Rica. And once you can, make simple sentences, then you can apply them to the real world. It's like boot camp again. People are different kinds of learners. Some are auditory, some visual, but sometimes forming a visual picture of the word that you learn may help you remember it. There used to be a school here called the Audio-Visual English and Spanish School, and they'd show you pictures of animals and all sorts of daily life situations from daily life. That was the method they used. Well, obviously, number 11, if you're a beginning level Spanish speaker or student, you're not going to be able to carry on an intellectual conversation. So what does that mean? You'll have to speak in simple sentences once you kind of get the feel, or use words. Single words that you learned from your vocabulary. Number 12, okay, this is back to using single nouns and maybe a few verbs. I'm going to tell you a story, and you'll understand everything I say. It'll be in English, but you can apply the same thing to Spanish. Let's say you live in California and you befriend a Mexican person or Latin person, mostly Mexican California, and you decide to socialize with the person. It doesn't have to be romantic and can be a regular friendship. And your friend, the Latino person, says to you the following: tomorrow, my car, pick up, 8 o'clock morning, Malibu Beach, sun, swim, rest on the sand, lunch, rest, more sun, 4 o'clock, home, change, movie, Red Lobster. Do you ever just, everybody understood everything I said, and I didn't use one sentence. So my point is, while you're trying to survive before you improve your Spanish to make sentences, you can communicate with single words, okay? Like the word for fire is incendio. If you yell incendio, incendio, people know there's going to be a fire. You don't have to explain what's going on. Okay, you'll think I'm crazy on number 13. Spanish and English are about 70% similar. They come from Latin, so a lot of the words have the same roots. There are many cognates, which I'll explain in a second, words that are almost the same in both languages. So look for similarities between the two languages. When I was learning Spanish, it wasn't my first language, I had a great breakthrough when I started looking at similarities. Because I already speak English, so 70% of it must be similar to Spanish. There's a book. I gave you a little packet of information, and there's a Spanish book in there mentioned called Madrigal's Magic Key to Spanish. She was a Costa Rican who moved to the States when she was a child, but never lost her love for Spanish. And what she did, she started writing, becoming a Spanish teacher, and she wrote a couple of elementary textbooks. And in those textbooks, which are not a complete course in the Spanish language by any means, she shows some rules that you can apply from English to Spanish and form Spanish words. For example, words that end in ty, liberty. In Spanish, it's TID. Words that end in TION, nation. In Spanish, it's CION. So right there, you have two examples of forming words in the language, another language which are very similar to English. Cognates. Cognates are other words that are almost the same in both languages. For example, John Deere tractors, tractor, okay? Spelled the same way in English and Spanish, it's just pronounced differently in Spanish. Instead of tractor, with the emphasis on the first half of the word, it's tractor, okay? Motor, motor. So there's a lot of words that are the same in both languages, you just have to pronounce them. So, similarities. Okay, 14 is kind of, the gentleman tomorrow is going to give you a Spanish lesson. He'll get into this a little bit. In order to make a sentence, you have to have a verb in it, an action word. Run, jump, sit, drink, etc. You'll start out learning the present tense if you study Spanish formally. Present tense is anything that's happening in the present. I walk, I talk, I'm eating, I'm running, I'm swimming. Anything occurring in the present tense. Tense means time. Okay? And the easiest thing to do when you start as a beginner, take the one tense at a time, the present. I do this, I do that, etc. And practice the verbs, using the verbs to make sentences. One of the problems with language schools, some language schools, is that Americans want instant gratification. They want to learn Spanish overnight. Say, saying, I've seen it here, I'm going to take 5 hours of Spanish a day in 1 year, I'm going to be fluent. Well, it won't happen. It'll snowball, okay? You'll get frustrated and you'll give up. The best thing to do is take a couple hours a week of your studying, master the material, and then move on. You will make progress, but don't overload yourself, okay? Study the grammar, but don't get bogged down on it. In it. One thing to read, one of the best thing is newspapers. The most practical thing are the funnies, okay, the cartoons. Why? Those big bubbles with the dialogue, that's real spoken Spanish, not textbook Spanish. Okay? Actually, the children's comics books are really good, you know. It's kind of a regression to, to your childhood, but you're learning baby talk basically, but it's practical. 17, it takes time to learn a language. If I could teach you to speak Spanish in a few months, I'd be richer than Bill Gates. It takes time. You've got to make time. But with effort, you can improve, and it's very rewarding, learning in small increments. Okay, I'm going to change the subject here slightly. Getting a head start. All of you are here because you're obviously interested in Costa Rica. Some can come now, a month, 2 months, 2 years, maybe all sorts of other circumstances. If you can't come right away, one of the best things to do is start studying Spanish while you're waiting to come here. They have these great programs online like Duolingo, okay? They have Spanish classes, live classes, I think, like in junior colleges and other places where you can learn conversation on a basic level. There's all sorts of resources. You're really serious, you can go to a really expensive language intensive program like Berlitz or some other one. You can go to the bookstore or online, Amazon, and get some DVDs. There's a thing called Rosetta Stone. They hype a lot. They say, oh, it's the greatest. It's okay. It's just one of the means to an end. You've got to do the things I told you. Read, listen to the news, and study in some type of school if you'd like to. One thing you can, if you learn better, if you want to go to a Spanish school with other people, they have class settings here. Or you can go one-on-one if you're not that gregarious. But the good thing now, you can study online with a teacher one-on-one, which is very good. The man who's coming tomorrow, Wagner, to speak, he offers those kind of classes, interactive, one-on-one, at your convenience. If you reside in an area where there's no classes, you can get DVDs and some of the other things I just told you, Duolingo. Everybody likes Duolingo. I have a friend who's used it. It teaches you the basics of conversation. It doesn't teach you a lot of slang, which most people speak, just like English, a lot of slang, but it teaches you the basics to learn the Spanish language. Radio programs are good. TV programs. Every place in the States, they have so many Hispanics. There's some type of cable TV programs. One thing you can do is watch the news in English, the world news, and watch it in Spanish. See how much you can pick up afterwards. Another thing you can do, a lot of people come down here and they spend a summer or a month or whatever taking a language vacation where they have a month of intensive Spanish of some type. Some people live with families so they can have more interaction and hear Spanish in real life situations. Finally, befriend some Spanish speakers at home. When I was living in the States before I moved here, we had a Spanish-English club. We had a potluck dinner every 2 weeks on a Sunday, and we had people, Hispanics, trying to learn English, and non-Hispanics trying to learn Spanish. So we'd practice with each other and would help each other answer questions. I made a lot of good friends. That's another idea. Okay, by following this advice, um, you can prepare yourself to live in a country like Costa Rica, have a lifelong hobby. As I alluded to earlier, in fact, the other day, learning another language as an adult improves the plasticity of your brain, which helps ward off dementia, supposedly. Look it up on the internet. It's not a figment of my imagination. There was a famous, is that it? Yeah. Okay, there was a famous, probably the most famous writer in history in the Spanish world. His name was Miguel de Cervantes, and he wrote a book called Don Quixote de la Mancha. Anyway, you can't read it in Spanish because it's in medieval Spanish. But it's full of a lot of sayings we use today, like the sky is the limit. That came from that book, and a lot more. But there's one that really stuck with me, and it's applicable to everybody here. It says, to know another language is to know another world. So if you live in a country like Costa Rica and you know some Spanish, you're actually living in two worlds. You can live in the world of the people and relate to people here, understand the culture better, make friends, and then you have your English friends too. So it's advantageous to learn at least survival Spanish, and it's really fun. I mean, the people here have great senses of humor. They make fun of everything. My son says that's why we never get anything done.